That single moment when you snap and lose control could be the one that unravels everything you've spent years building. But ancient philosophers uncovered a method to transform that fury into ironclad mental fortitude. Let me paint you a picture. You're crawling through traffic, already running behind for a critical meeting. The driver ahead of you is coasting along 10 miles below the limit. Your blood pressure rockets. Your fingers strangle the steering wheel until your knuckles go white. Ring any bells? Here's the wild part. In that precise moment, your brain is literally turning against itself. Neuroscientists have demonstrated that when anger takes over our prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for logical thinking essentially shuts down for as long as 6 hours. 6 full hours. That's the science behind seeing red. But here's where things get fascinating. More than 2,000 years ago, a group of ancient thinkers uncovered something that modern science is only beginning to validate. They concluded that anger isn't something that happens to you. It's something you select. And the moment you grasp this, you unlock a superpower that the majority of people will never access. The Stoics weren't just idle thinkers lounging around contemplating existence. These were emperors, enslaved people, warriors and statesmen navigating life or death circumstances every single day. Marcus Aurelius was governing the entire Roman Empire while scribbling philosophical reflections in his private journal. Epictetus was born into slavery yet rose to become one of the most consequential thinkers in all of human history. And every single one of them shared one defining trait. They had conquered their anger in ways that border on superhuman. Research out of Harvard Medical School reveals that individuals who cannot regulate their anger are 19% more likely to develop heart disease. They suffer higher rates of stroke, weakened immune system, and significantly shorter lifespans. But those who master anger management live longer, cultivate stronger relationships, earn more, and report far greater levels of personal satisfaction. So what did these ancient masters understand that was still missing? What were their secrets for converting volcanic rage into unshakable serenity? Today I'm going to walk you through the 8 most powerful Stoic strategies for taming your anger. And I'll warn you up front, this isn't fluffy self-help content. This is battle-hardened wisdom that has stood the test of more than 2,000 years. But before we get into it, you need to grasp something fundamental about how anger actually operates. Most people assume anger just strikes. Someone cuts you off. Boom, you're livid. Your boss questions your work. Boom, you're seething. Your partner skips the dishes. Boom, you're seeing red. But here's what the Stoics figured out that modern psychology is only now catching up to. There is actually a gap between what occurs around you and how you emotionally respond to it. A tiny window of opportunity that virtually everyone overlooks. Epictetus referred to this as the space between stimulus and response, and within that space lies your true freedom. Strategy number 1. Master the dichotomy of control. This is the bedrock upon which everything else is built. The Stoics separated the entire universe into precisely 2 buckets. Things within your control and things outside of it. You cannot control what other people choose to do. You cannot control traffic, weather, promotions, or the outcome of a game. But here's what you absolutely can control. Your thoughts, your actions, and your responses. A behavioral psychologist from Yale University devoted 15 years to examining anger patterns and discovered that 89% of everything that triggers people falls squarely into the cannot control category. Sit with that. We are burning our mental energy raging over things that lie entirely beyond our reach. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He was navigating plagues, warfare, and political treachery that would make your worst nightmare look like a pleasant afternoon. Yet he remained composed because he kept his attention fixed solely on what was genuinely within his power. Here's how you apply this immediately. The next time you feel that anger beginning to surge, stop and pose yourself one single question. Can I actually do anything to change this? If the answer is yes, funnel that energy into action. If the answer is no, release it on the spot. Don't burn another ounce of mental energy on it. Strategy number 2. Harness the power of the pause. Seneca, who served as an advisor to emperors and ranked among the wealthiest men in all of Rome, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Modern neuroscience completely supports this. When anger flares, your amygdala saturates your body with stress hormones. Your heart rate surges, your breathing tightens, and your capacity for rational thought collapses. But here's the critical insight. This chemical reaction lasts only about 90 seconds if you refuse to stoke it with additional angry thinking. 90 seconds. That's the entire window. Yet most people don't pause at all. They fire back instantly, making choices in the worst possible mental state. They fire off the angry email. They say the words they can never unsay. They make the decision that fractures relationships and buries opportunities. The Stoics developed a deceptively simple but extraordinarily effective technique. Count to 10. But not casually. Count slowly, and with every number, draw a deep, deliberate breath. This gives your prefrontal cortex the recovery time it needs to come back online and reassert control. A neuroscientist from Johns Hopkins discovered that people who consistently apply this pause technique cut their angry outbursts by more than 70% within just 2 weeks. But the pause is merely the entry point. What you do inside that pause is what distinguishes true masters from everyone else. Strategy number 3, reframe your perspective. This is where the Stoics become genuinely ingenious. Rather than attempting to smother anger, they learn to rewrite the internal story they were telling themselves about what was taking place. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Consider a concrete example. You're seated at a restaurant and the server completely botches your order. Most people would bristle, maybe grumble, and let it poison their mood for the next hour. But a Stoic would reason, this server is probably having a brutal shift. Maybe they're brand new and still finding their footing. Maybe they're carrying personal burdens I can't see. This is my opportunity to exercise patience and extend some compassion. Identical situation. Entirely different emotional outcome. A research team at Stanford University examined this reframing technique and stumbled upon something remarkable. People who practiced reshaping their internal narrative around frustrating events showed a 43% reduction in cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, and reported feeling measurably happier across their entire day. Here's the practice. The moment something ignites your anger, immediately ask yourself, what's another way I could interpret this situation? Push yourself to generate at least 3 alternative readings. You'll be stunned by how quickly this single shift can completely neutralize your anger. Strategy number 4, embrace the obstacle as the path. This may be the most counterintuitive strategy on this list, but it's also the most transformative. The Stoics didn't merely learn to endure difficult people and situations. They learned to be genuinely thankful for them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Consider it from this angle. Every single person who provokes your anger is actually handing you a gift. They're offering you a complimentary training session in patience, wisdom, and emotional resilience. Without them, how would you ever forge these indispensable life skills? A cognitive behavioral therapist with more than 2 decades of clinical experience frames it this way. Your difficult coworkers, your demanding relatives, your frustrating neighbors, they are all your personal trainers for emotional fitness. The more you practice staying grounded around them, the more formidable you become. This completely inverts the way we think about anger. Instead of viewing difficult people as obstacles, you begin treating them as opportunities. Instead of avoiding challenging circumstances, you start actively welcoming them because you understand they're sharpening your mental edge. But this strategy demands something that most people are genuinely afraid to confront. Strategy number 5, accept human nature. Here's an uncomfortable truth that the Stoics grasped firmly. People are going to let you down. They're going to be selfish, short-sighted, rude, and thoughtless. And getting angry about it is the equivalent of raging at water for being wet. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, "Today I will encounter interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." But rather than dreading these moments, he mentally rehearsed for them. A social psychologist from Harvard studied this pattern and found that people who accept human imperfection in advance are 67% less likely to experience anger when those imperfections inevitably surface. Researchers coined this disappointment immunity. The central insight is this: when someone treats you poorly, they aren't truly attacking you. They are exposing their own character limitations. Their conduct says absolutely nothing about your value and everything about their current level of emotional and personal development. Epictetus, who endured years of literal enslavement and mistreatment, observed, "When someone is properly grounded in life, they shouldn't have to look outside themselves for approval." This is not an invitation to become passive or spineless. It means responding to harmful behavior from a foundation of genuine strength rather than reactive emotion. You can establish firm boundaries, remove yourself from toxic dynamics, and defend your interests, all without surrendering to anger. And there's one more dimension to all of this that most people never reach. According to a landmark study from researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, people who regularly practice Stoic principles show measurable structural changes in their brains within as little as 8 weeks. The regions tied to emotional regulation actually grow more robust, while the zones linked to reactive anger begin to shrink. Dr. Ray Sarah Johnson, a neuroscientist with over 15 years studying emotional control, explains it this way: "What the ancient Stoics uncovered through philosophical inquiry, we are now documenting through brain imaging. The human mind is extraordinarily adaptable, and we can literally reconstruct our emotional wiring through sustained, deliberate practice." A clinical psychologist from Yale Medical School who has worked with thousands of anger management patients put it plainly: "The Stoic framework is the most powerful long-term approach I've encountered." Unlike methods that simply suppress the feeling, Stoicism fundamentally rewires how the brain interprets situations that could otherwise provoke anger. Research from the Mayo Clinic indicates that people who apply Stoic principles carry 34% lower rates of hypertension, experience 28% fewer stress-related health issues, and maintain substantially stronger relationships across every dimension of their lives. And perhaps most striking of all, a longitudinal study tracking thousands of people across 20 years found that those who mastered emotional regulation through Stoic practices earned significantly more annually than their reactive peers. The reason is straightforward. Employers place enormous value on people who can remain composed under pressure, make sound decisions in high-tension situations, and sustain productive relationships even when things get heated. Strategy number 6: practice negative visualization. This one sounds grim on the surface, but it is genuinely liberating beneath it. The Stoics made a regular habit of mentally rehearsing the loss of the things they cherished most: their health, their loved ones, their wealth, their standing. Why deliberately dwell on such things? Because it constructs what psychologists now call resilience reserves. When you have mentally prepared yourself for loss, minor inconveniences become almost laughable. A traffic delay, a dismissive customer, a technical failure, these things forfeit their ability to destabilize you because you've already rehearsed confronting far darker scenarios with composure. Seneca wrote that what catches us completely unprepared strikes hardest of all, and that surprise amplifies the weight of any misfortune. A trauma therapist from Johns Hopkins employs a contemporary version of this practice with her patients. She found that people who invest just 5 minutes daily imagining difficult scenarios and rehearsing their responses are 52% less likely to have explosive reactions when those scenarios actually materialize. Here's how to build this practice. Once each week, carve out 10 minutes and imagine that something you deeply value has been taken from you. How would you respond? Where would you find meaning? How would you locate peace within that? This kind of mental rehearsal forges emotional stability that holds even when life becomes genuinely brutal. Strategy number 7: live inside the present moment. The vast majority of anger originates in one of two directions: replaying what happened yesterday or anxiously anticipating tomorrow. Someone humiliated you last week and you're still smoldering. You're bracing for a tense conversation tonight and you're already wound up. But the Stoics recognized something profound here. You can only sustain anger about things that are not actually happening right now. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not because what came before and what lies ahead are irrelevant, but because this moment is the only territory where your power is real." A mindfulness researcher from MIT examined this phenomenon and found that people who can reliably redirect their attention back to the present experience 78% drop in angry thoughts and a 65% reduction in stress hormones. The practice is deceptively simple, though it demands real repetition. When you sense anger beginning to gather, ask yourself what is genuinely happening right now, in this precise moment. Most of the time, the honest answer is something like, "I'm sitting in a chair, breathing, physically unharmed." The anger is being generated by narratives about the past or projections about the future, not by anything actually occurring in present reality. Strategy number 8: transform anger into action. This is the final strategy, and it may carry the most weight of all. The Stoics were never interested in eliminating emotion entirely. They were committed to channeling it with intention and purpose. Sometimes anger is carrying real, legitimate information. Perhaps someone is exploiting your good nature. Perhaps a situation is genuinely unjust. Perhaps a boundary has been violated and needs to be clearly drawn. The defining move is converting reactive anger into deliberate, constructive action. Rather than erupting or shutting down, you pause, evaluate the situation with clarity, and then respond in a way that actually moves things in a better direction. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Don't just speak about wanting to be better. Use the hard moments as the very stages on which you demonstrate what you're made of." A behavioral economist from Princeton found that individuals who learn to convert their anger into focused, constructive action are 87% more likely to accomplish their long-term objectives. The reason is simple. They stop hemorrhaging energy through emotional reactions and begin directing it toward meaningful results. But here's something that will genuinely reshape how you understand all of this. What most people never realize is that anger is, at its core, an addiction. Every time you lose your temper, your brain floods itself with a cocktail of adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dopamine that generates a fleeting but powerful sensation of strength and moral certainty. Your brain develops a real dependency on these chemical surges. That's why some people appear to actively hunt for things to get upset about. They aren't simply difficult personalities. They are chemically dependent on the hormones their own rage produces. But here is the extraordinary part. When you practice these Stoic strategies with consistency, your brain begins synthesizing entirely different compounds: serotonin, oxytocin, GABA, the chemicals associated with calm assurance and authentic contentment. You don't just feel better. You become neurologically wired for peace rather than for conflict. A neurochemist from Stanford University who has spent more than a decade investigating this phenomenon explains people who genuinely master emotional regulation aren't just experiencing a mood shift. They are transforming their brain chemistry at a foundational level. They become organically calm, quietly confident, and naturally resilient. And here is the final insight that ties the whole picture together, and it may be the most important of everything shared today. What the ancient Stoics grasp, and what our modern world has largely abandoned, is this anger is not evidence of strength. It is evidence of having lost command of yourself. True power lies in choosing your response rather than being swept along by your emotions. Every time you put these strategies into practice, you are not simply managing your anger in that one instance. You are literally reshaping your brain to become the kind of person who naturally remains steady when everything around them is in chaos. You are constructing a form of self-assurance that doesn't depend on conditions, because it comes from the certainty that you can meet whatever arrives. Consider the people you genuinely respect most. Your finest leaders, your most trusted mentors, the individuals you look up to without reservation. Do any of them detonate when circumstances don't go their way? Do they unravel over petty frustrations? They don't. They have absorbed what the Stoics knew, that the truest form of strength is remaining grounded while the world around you loses its footing. Marcus Aurelius administered one of the mightiest empires ever assembled. Yet he wrote about how much unnecessary suffering the person avoids who doesn't monitor what his neighbor thinks or does, but attends only to his own conduct. The choice rests entirely with you. You can continue allowing your emotions to steer you, reacting to every provocation like debris tossed by the wind. Or you can commit to these ancient practices and cultivate the kind of unshakable inner solidity that makes you genuinely free. Your anger has been running your life long enough. Don't you think it's time to reclaim the controls? The question was never whether difficult people and trying circumstances are coming. They are. The only question worth asking is, when they arrive, who are you going to choose to be?